Hello and welcome to another edition of On the Mic with Mike. I am Mike Jarvis, and on the mic with me this time is Hensey Fenton, PhD. Shall I say Dr. or Professor Fenton?
Either one, either one.
Thank you very much for taking the time to be with me on this edition. It's really a thrill to have you, and we have a lot that we can get our teeth into, and that we are going to in any event. A lot of folks in Montserrat would associate you as the foundation person behind the Bank of Montserrat. Now you are semi-retired, as you've said to me offline, and you're more of a lecturer in business and entrepreneurship. Can we just begin by telling us a bit of history about the genesis, as it were, of Bank of Montserrat and your involvement? Because that institution is like a national institution now.
Well, it was actually Dr. George Irish. He was a guest speaker at a Montserrat Association dinner, and he just said a few words. Where are our bankers? We need a local bank, and we need someone from the diaspora to go back. And I just got at that time, I just got the urge, and I called Chief Minister John Osborne at that time and told him what I thought about it. And he said, come on down. So I went down and discussed it with him, and he was in favor of getting it done. So I came back and I started to put the plans in place and work up all of the documentation needed. And I moved down. I think it was in 87, November 87. And we got our license in 88. I got some of the local Montserratians to come up with some funds. I think it was 20 of us as the starting capital, the base, the foundation. And then I moved around to the New York, Canada, London, and talked about the bank and actually got Montserratians to realize their patriotic duty that we were the only island then without a local bank. And they came through. And so we got the license and started in 88.
You know, that is mind blowing. And mind blowing in context of what we are talking about in this series. All of this talk now about Montserrat being at a critical juncture, at the crossroads. We need a reset. Well, that's a bit of me, but the reset and the crossroads bit. But I think there's a general acceptance that we are at this moment. And so when you consider what you did, what you drove back in 1988 to where we are now. Okay, we had a hurricane, 1989 Hurricane Hugo, and we've had a volcano. I mean, we've had impacts of natural disasters that no other country in the Caribbean, and I keep saying, to the best of my knowledge, not in the Western Hemisphere, has had to deal with. But here we are. Dr. Fenton, we need a Bank of Montserrat moment again.
Well, it's I was thinking about that when you called me, and I was thinking that yes, we need to find a way that we can all come together. I did take a look at the CIA fact book just to see how many people we've got in the diaspora. They said 40,000, but I think it's much more than that. And if we can look back and see what happened with Bank of Montserrat and use that same, I say, formula, maybe a little bit of difference now, but use that same formula, I think that we can find the funds available to do what any type of investment or building or infrastructure, anything like that, we can get that done.
But the point is, and this program is not about the Bank of Montserrat, let me point that out. However, because of your leadership and your direct involvement, your pioneering efforts to get that institution started, are you, might you be suggesting that we need another Bank of Montserrat, or we need another drive similar to the effort that you and others put into establishing an institution of that nature?
a similar approach, I remember when I was there that the Chamber of Commerce and through the chief minister at that time, Ruben, we were going to be doing at the airport we had what do we call it? It was with the rocks. Trying to remember that, but we were going to do something similar. In fact, we started to raise funds to put a similar thing like Bank of Montserrat. But it's not. I would think that just some numbers, because I think maybe this would help. Bank of Montserrat can be the financial instrument for whatever investments are needed. I will tell you, I'm not sure if anyone took a look at the financials of Bank of Montserrat for the 2023 year end. But the bank has invested over $200 million overseas in investments. Now, why can't that be used to fund any type of investment that we're looking for? Now, I'm maybe talking out of turn because I have not at all even discussed that with the chairman or anyone. But it's just a suggestion. I mean, we need to look at a public sector, private sector partnership where the government, and the question is whether the government can float bonds, but have the private sector buy bonds from the government use the funds to do whatever needs to be done. Now, we need to drive that. We need to be the individuals to drive it. I'm not sure whether the government can borrow. And I know they have overdrafts, so that's, yes, that's approved. But whether they can on their own float bonds, that would be an ideal way to go about getting the diaspora involved, getting the Bank of Montserrat involved, and the locals involved also, and raise the funds to do what we need to do.
I do recall a few years back, I wrote an article, and I'm no person with particular banking expertise. All right, well, I do bank and I've done some work in the financial sector. But a part of a research project that we were working on at the time, and I came across, and there are a few Montserratians like yourself who are very much involved at a high level in the international banking sector. And I wrote something, I'll have to pull it up, saying that why don't we set up something like like a wealth fund or a sovereign fund, and have Montserratians contribute to it and use that money to build, retirement homes, or just build homes in Montserrat, and Montserratians can contribute to it. And as a result of that, that could then give the government additional revenue, and that could be seen as a means of a stakeholdership in Montserrat and a right to vote, which itself is another type of a discussion. But on the particular issue of banking and finance, where your expertise lies at the moment, given that Montserrat is still, and apparently is likely to be for a little while, unless we somehow change direction, is in British aid. During the time 1988, Montserrat was not in budgetary aid, but understandably because of the situation with the natural disasters, yes, the island needs a helping hand. Britain is the administrative authority, and they have a responsibility to that. But do you get the sense that, I call it addiction, that there's an almost a dependence on it, that we've become so accustomed to it that to let that go might just be psychologically a bit difficult on a national scale?
I don't think it's difficult. I think that if you can appeal to the patriotic, I may say patriotic duty of Montserratans to make sure that the island survive. Now, I was back there on vacation in June, and I took my son and my grandson with me. And they were so much in love with the island. So it's not just us. We are looking at the generations that are coming that may want to, enjoy Montserrat too. So we need to, as you were saying, change direction so that we can leave a Montserrat for them. But of course, they're going to want to have a Montserrat that they're accustomed to, their style of living, and so on. So we need to find a way to get, as I said, change direction, not be dependent so much on Britain for funds, but generate our own. And I think if we can appeal to the patriotic duty, as I said, of all of us, I don't think that Montserratians would mind making an investment, even if that return may not be what they can get overseas or where they live. So yes, I do think that we need to change direction. Yes, I do think that we need a moment like the Bank of Montserrat moment, but this one I think would have to be more of a partnership with the public sector, the government, and with the private sector, the businesses that are there, and also with the individuals who live there and who live overseas.
Would it require a significant psychological shift to get to that? When you compare the situation now and all the challenges within which there are tremendous opportunities as well. But back in 1987, 88, the entire thinking, I dare say, even the mindset might have been different at that time. I mean, we were rolling on a mindset of the good times are rolling.
You're right. We were. I remember we had the highest per capita income in the Caribbean at that time. So yes, things were going well. But I still had to appeal to Montserratians. You know, we're a small population. We know one another, and we know who we are, where we came from, and that a lot of times prevents us from coming together. And I had to overcome that. So it's really just a matter of again overcoming that. Once you let Montserratians know that what we are doing is for the benefit of Montserratians and for their children and grandchildren, I'm sure they'll step up. I think again, the involvement of government would put a more of a stability on it. And now, because of the way the economy is, you'd want to know that we have a stable government, which we do. And so the individuals who are going to invest will be looking at that and will come in, rather than if we had a group that wanted to sell shares now. The trust may not be there as much, but if you had the government involved, I think that we would be a much better chance of being able to do whatever it needs to make the move, the change.
You know, what is also quite interesting and just paralleling with what you just mentioned there, in preparing for this conversation that we're having, and we know there's a political campaign going on in Montserrat for the elections on the 24th of October. And just, I should say, coincidentally, I was listening to one of the political parties doing, you know, normal political rhetoric and campaign promotion, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that that particular party was talking about, and I think I've heard other parties talking about it as well, is to develop a financial services sector in Montserrat. And they were sort of drawing comparisons to many of the other overseas territories. And they were really rolling on it. And there was a lot of enthusiasm about it. And I would say until one individual said, but we need to get our banking system sorted out because it is too difficult. We can't have visitors coming here or Montserratians returning home or tourists coming here and they can't use their bank cards or the banking system is not up to par, etc., etc. And to me, listening to that, it didn't put a damper on the idea, but it's a reality check that even they themselves had to admit. So is it that, based on your experience and your expertise, that there would be quite a bit of groundwork to be done before we seriously start considering embarking on the path that you're suggesting?
Well, I want to say yes and no. I know that the bank, because I experienced it myself when I was there, or not me, actually, my son, could not utilize the ATM for foreign using a foreign card. And I understand that there are some issues with the Bank of Montserrat and their overseas accounts. Well, I shouldn't say problems really. I mean, technical problems. And so that needs to be resolved. You cannot have tourism if tourists cannot have access to their funds and spend their funds the way they want to. Now, you do have the ability that you can use your card in the with the merchants, but you may want to have some cash itself, and there's no ability except if you do a cash advance rather than being able to go to the ATM. That's a technical thing that I'm sure the bank can resolve, so it's not a major thing. What I was really referring to is if we're going to have the changes that we need, we're going to have to make a Montserrat that I want to say the younger generation and all of the things they're accustomed to overseas, and that they have access to that when they get to Montserrat. We can get into a lot of things about the infrastructure there, the mode of transportation and so on. But all those could be resolved again with if we're talking about an investment department of the government, let's say, I'm not sure how you would term it. All that would happen then is that agency, that department would be responsible to make sure that the funding comes together for the projects that are going to be needed. And as I said, I don't want to say it's fairly simple, but the funding is there. The funding is there. It's really just a matter of having the bank recognize that instead of investing, $50 million in other Caribbean countries, $58 million which they have in overseas, let that be funded in something in Montserrat. But you're going to do that in conjunction with individuals. So, for instance, if we had the government and that agency selling a bond, for instance, whatever the amount may be, the bank puts in, individuals put in, and the government would then use that funds to administer and do whatever they want. They will come in, of course, in the terms of making sure that you have what we call the sinking fund and so on, so that when the time to pay the bond back, the money is there. So it just needs some structuring. But the finance, I see the finance there on Montserrat and in Montserrat's hand. And so again, finance is normally, when you talk about your economics, we've got the capital. I'm sure we have the labor to do what has to be done or get it done. And so the resources are there. So it's just a matter of us recognizing and appealing, again, as I said, to Montserratians outside to invest in this fund. And again, you had mentioned your fund. It's the trust, I think, that if we got the government involved, the trust would be there a little bit more. But what your idea is the same type of idea. The structure is similar that I'm talking about.
Okay, because what I find particularly amazing from what you're saying is, it puts the Bank of Montserrat as an institution sort of front and center. And where you spoke about the funds, the Montserrat/Montserratian funds are available to do a lot of what we want to do.
Absolutely.
But here we are in an environment where there is this dependence on British aid. Now, I don't think there's a suggestion of to immediately get rid of British aid, but if we have our own money as well, one gets the impression that, well, because the British aid impact is so noticeable that
Mhm.
the planning for any development, infrastructure, whatever in Montserrat is more directly linked to that British aid money than it is to the Montserrat money within the Bank of Montserrat that is apparently investing elsewhere. But that money is right there for us to do a lot of what Montserrat needs. I find that
Absolutely.
fascinating, bordering on shocking.
Absolutely. And if we can generate our own funds, we drive the decision as to what we want in the island, rather than being subjected to, I don't want to say, I say the whims of others. We're the ones that would drive once we've got the financial resources. And again, as I said, it's there. I will tell you, the Bank of Montserrat has, when they purchased the Royal Bank there, um, their deposit base grew, of course, and the loans that they've got there are at a very, very low percentage. So most of their income comes from investment right now. 60% of their revenue comes from investment, which is unlike a typical bank, if you will. Typical bank gets their money from interest on loans. Their money comes from interest on the investment. Now, I may get into a lot of trouble for uh, suggesting this, but I think that we've got the capital there. And maybe that's what the Bank of Montserrat, that was one of the things the Bank of Montserrat was intended to do, to develop the country itself. That was one of the missions that we had. By the way, just so you know, the chairman of the right now, um, he was involved with me when we were putting the plans together back in 86, 87. So he's been there from day one. He knows the mission that we had, and I think he's carrying it out. But this is just maybe one more step to let the bank be the conduit for the development in Montserrat.
I mean, talking about Montserrat being at a crossroads, I think we just, with this conversation up to this point, just shifted the dial massively. We're talking now about a Bank of Montserrat movement, even though this conversation was not really about the Bank of Montserrat, but
That's
looking
true.
at the possibilities and the opportunities. I say this is what they call a paradigm shift. The potential of that is right here in front of us.
Yeah, yeah. And as I said, I'm not sure how many people took a look at the bank's annual report that they put out. By the way, that just came out, I think, in May or June of this year. Their year end is September, so things may have changed from last year September to this September, but the statement that they put out is there. And the board, the investment committee, of course, gets their recommendations from the group that they have making the investments for them. So I'm sure they'd have to get approval there, but the money is belongs to monstrations, put it that way, and so it should be used for our benefit.
Wow. I am actually not trying to process, the real possibilities that this information or this type of thinking offers to Montserrat. And I would suspect even more so than it was when you guys started the bank way back in 1988, because we had a multitude of banks in Montserrat. Well, we know what
Yes.
had happened, but the Bank of Montserrat was never, ever, ever uh, implicated in that. I mean, the Bank of Montserrat continues, is still there today. But today, whereas back then we had what? About 5 or 6 over-the-counter banks or something like
Yeah,
that in Montserrat.
when we started, there was some, we call them the offshore banks, and they went by the wayside, and you really just had the Royal Bank and Barclays Bank as the competitors. So the three of us were there at that
Was
time.
Chase Manhattan still operating at that time?
No, Chase
Okay.
Chase went out right after we got in, or just before we got in. there was only one other bank that was there. Well, no, there were a couple of banks that you could have
Yeah,
walked
you
in
could have
and done
walked
business.
in,
Yeah.
made over-the-counter deposits and
Yes,
withdrawals.
yes, you
Yeah,
could have
yeah.
done that. And then we had, I think, First American also. But after that, after they all left, it was just the Royal Bank, Barclays Bank, and Bank of Montserrat.
But now, today, where we are, we as a fully operating bank, I think, is that what you call an A bank? We only have the Bank of Montserrat
Yes.
and the St. Patrick's Credit Union. So
Yeah, and
that
credit union.
actually,
You still have, I'm not sure if they're taking deposit. As a matter of fact, I don't think you still have the government savings bank. They still exist, or there were their
I
funds
am
there.
not too certain about the status of that, to be honest with you.
Yes, I'm not sure whether they're still. I don't think they're active that you can take deposits, but the funds are still there, controlled by the government. They were asking people who wanted the funds to come get it, but
Yes,
I'm not sure.
that I do recall. That I
Yeah,
do
I'm not sure where
recall.
they are. But right now, Bank of Montserrat is the only A bank, A licensed bank there on the island.
Well, I'm just following this conversation on the path that it's taking us now because I am saying that the Bank of Montserrat as an institution is particularly central to the development, the recovery, the resetting, revitalization, whatever you want to call it, of Montserrat going forward. Because previously we were talking about, you had spoken about a sort of an investment and promotion type agency, that sort of thing, which pops up from time to time, especially with reference to the MDC and whatever legal state that is in
Yeah.
at the moment. But the driver, I am going to say it, the driver for Montserrat right now, or the engine of growth for Montserrat right now, seems to lie in a vehicle called the Bank of Montserrat.
Yes, again, as a banker, I would like to see a shared responsibility with others. So the bank may not want to put all of his funds in this project, or maybe more likely to do it if it knew that it had, let's say, 50% of the funding came from Montserratans. And so you diversify, they would like to diversify, I'm sure. And so they may not want to put 100% funding in any one project.
Yeah,
And that's why the suggestion would be maybe for the government to float a bond, and the bank would buy a portion, and the individuals would buy a portion of the bonds, and so together all of us are involved. And if the government say would do what maybe a tax-free type of a bond, then the yield to the bank would be great. The yield to, well, for people overseas, it may not matter that much because we would still have to pay taxes on the income. So it may not, but it may not be a problem if we recognize that it's for the good of Montserratans. I look at this as, again, as I said, my son and my grandson, what I can leave for them, the Montserrat that I knew and the Montserrat that they love, and their generations. We want to be able to do that. So you're right, the bank may be the fulcrum, but at the same time, we need others to come in too to show their support.
I was about to ask you, how would you summarize, or what message would you, from the position of your vast experience and your expertise, give to the politicians, the political parties campaigning at the moment to form the next government, especially given that I think we are all in agreement that this is almost a now or never moment for Montserrat. And I dare say, and put this on me, not on you, but I dare say, I think you have provided a solution. So, what would be your message to them to wrap up?
Well, the message is that we can do whatever it takes to make Montserrat a Montserrat for the future. And we are not talking now, 5 years, 10 years. We are looking out 25, 30 years down the road. I mean, it's a 30 years since we had the disaster, and look where we are. So we need to make the change and get Montserrat back. And the suggestion would be to have consultation with the Bank of Montserrat and also with the diaspora as to the funding mechanism for any project that they would want to see first. Of course, these got to be structured, but the financing source is there, and so you should be able to use that source to do whatever you see, whatever the problems are, that we have to take care of those problems and put Montserrat back on the right track. We can do it.
Well, Dr. Fenton, thank you so much for taking the time, and I'll end on this note. I think I'm actually feeling it right now, a ripple of enthusiasm going through the Montserrat community at home and in the diaspora, just listening to what you've just outlined there for us. Thank you so very much. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. No problem at all. Take care.